A lot of people get started with Hype because they don't want to code, and admittedly, that was me back in 2011. But something changed with Hype. The more I used the software, the less I used the timeline, and the more I used JavaScript. The looking template, the second free template in this series, reflects that change. Hype is powerful software, but to truly unlock its power, you need to code. The trick is knowing when to use the basic tools, or when you're going to need to get your hands dirty. So here are the two main reasons to add code to Hype. Reason number 1. You're trying to do something that Hype doesn't do. At its core, Hype is HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. If you view the source code of a Hype project, you can see the truth. If you think you can't code, you are, by the simple virtue of using Hype. This is programming, but Tumult can't anticipate every possible feature that every customer could ever want. Not only is this impossible, the runtime would be huge. This leads to reason number 2. You're trying to do something dynamic. Hype is great if you want an action to occur at a specific moment in time or when a specific event occurs. But if you have many timelines, many scenes, and/or many elements, you might want to use code to better manage your project. But it's more than that. By making your code dynamic, you can make your animation dynamic. To better understand this, let's look into the eyes of the happy face. In the beginning of this video, the eyes moved around. That animation was done completely in Hype, with all native features. But here, the eyeballs are following the mouse movement. How would you do that with Hype alone? You can't. It's impossible. It needs code. Hype doesn't have an easy option for getting the mouse location. Do you remember when I said that JavaScript is at the core of Hype? You can see this by looking at the actions pane. On mouse click, on mouse down, on mouse up, on mouse over, and on mouse out. Those are JavaScript events. And it does look like a fine assortment of mouse events. However, there is one mouse event in particular that is missing. On mouse move. This is precisely how you can determine if your project requires coding. With the looking template, we hit both reasons for adding JavaScript. We're trying to do something that Hype doesn't do, which is track mouse movement. Additionally, we're trying to add dynamic eyeball movement to the project. It's not just one eyeball, but two. And just a side note, an on-drag event is different than an on-mouse move event. So, how do you add JavaScript to a Hype project? There are two main ways to do this. The first method is typical for web development. You could simply add your code to the head section of the HTML document. This is the traditional way to do it. There is a problem though. Your code could start running before your Hype project has finished loading. There are ways to manage that issue, but for this project, let's do something more traditional for Hype. From the scene pane, you can add the on-scene load action. That action can be used to run JavaScript, which is exactly what we want for this project. Since we're starting from a brand new project, you can use the new function option to create a new function. Hype then adds a new listing to the resources folder. This is where you can add your JavaScript code. Just use the Edit Source button at the bottom to bring up a code editing window. If you're fancy, and you have Hype Pro, you can use an external editor. This is a useful feature if you prefer to use something like Visual Studio Code, which is my personal preference. You can leave a comment if this bothers you. Do you prefer that I use the native code editor for these tutorials? Or do you like the look of Visual Studio Code? But for now, all we're going to do is change the name of the function. You can do that from the function line. Untitled function is the default name. Let's go with something more memorable, like looking. This project is only going to have one custom function, so we can keep it simple. For examples like these, I usually have the same name for the main scene, the custom JavaScript function, and the project itself. So let's change that. It's fortunate that we only have a single scene, because if the same scene is reloaded, you might get unexpected results from your code. That's especially true here, when we're manually adding event listeners. You don't want unnecessary copies of event listeners. But since the scene doesn't change, there's no problem. There is a particular problem with this scene though. There's nothing in it. So before we start adding code, let's add that happy face. The first element is an ellipse. Just drop that big yellow head in the center of the scene. You could hold the Shift key while resizing. That would keep the shape a perfect circle. But instead, I'm just going to manually enter the size values. It's 246 pixels for the width and 246 pixels for the height. By the way, the scene size is just like the previous lesson. That's 640 by 360 pixels, which is a standard 16 by 9 ratio. Now that we have our circle, it needs colorization. Fortunately, the crayons make short work of this task. First, set the background to a linear gradient. Then, a lemon yellow is the start color, and a tangerine orange is the end color. So festive. This is now design territory. You have a big decision to make. Should your character have a border? If you've ever seen the original Samurai Jack series, a cartoon famous for dropping the borders from their characters, border styling can make a big difference. Emoji are another example. There are many different families of emoji. Some have borders, while others do not. The slightly smiling face emoji from OpenMoji is an example. It has a thick black border. That's what we're going to do here, but perhaps not as big. 5 pixels should be enough. But did you notice what happened? The element got bigger too. This is not always a problem, but in this case it is. That's because the element size is specifically 246 pixels squared. So we can just put that right back. The constraint proportions option can help you maintain the ratio. For a square, that's a 1:1 ratio. For the next part, let's throw the circle in a group. You can right-click and select Group, or you can just use the icon in the toolbar. While it may seem strange, a single item can be in a group. But don't worry, it won't be alone for long. Let's make some eyeballs. Start with another ellipse. The size is 32 by 32 pixels. There is no border, it's just a black circle. This next part is a little tricky, but we're basically creating a group within a group. Just like before, the eyeball can be added to a new group. If you're having trouble understanding how groups work, they're just div tags. In other words, groups are elements too. That means they can be styled. So let's start by making the left eye. The background is a cartoony white, and there's a 2-pixel border. After you set the border, the element can be set to 64 by 64 pixels. If you were building robots, square eyes might work, but here, this is a humanoid face, so let's round those edges. You can accomplish this with the border radius setting. Just set the radius value to the same size as one of the sides. That's 64 pixels. Then, align the eyeball element to the right of the group and center it vertically. Technically, I suppose this is the iris/pupil element, but eyeball is easier to say. Anyway, think of the group like a clock, but instead of starting at the top, it starts at the right. That's the 0-degree mark. The idea is that the group will spin, along with the elements inside. Since there are 2 eyes, the group can be duplicated. Both elements will need to be properly positioned, or you could just eyeball it. The general idea is that the eyes should be the same distance from the center. But hey, if you want to build a Cyclops, it's your project. Once you're happy with the location, the next step is to label the elements. This is the part I find tricky. Which one's the left eye? Is it my left, or is it the emoji's left? I suppose it doesn't matter too much, as long as you stay consistent. The important part is in the identity pane. The eyes will be animated with JavaScript, individually. That's why it's important that each has a unique element ID. The group on the left side of the scene will be called Lefty, and the group on the right side of the scene will be called Righty. We're almost done with designing. Let's just quickly add a mouth. With Hype's vector drawing tool, this is fairly straightforward. Just use the vector shape element to add a point under the left eye, and then another point under the right eye. Hit the escape key to stop adding points. We do not want to close this vector shape. Instead, just click the middle of the line, and then drag that new point downwards. See? Easy. Just 3 points makes a happy face. Just move the points around until it looks good. This is where the anchor point mode can help. Double-click the vector shape to edit the points, which automatically brings up the vector shape pane. Faces are typically symmetrical, and since the main character is not smirking, we can use the mirrored option to make sure that the curve is the same on both sides. While in this editing mode, you might want to check the path options. The line cap should be round. That makes the mouth look more natural and cartoony. At the beginning of this video, the emoji was drawn into the scene. That technique is accomplished here with the line draw option. Just move the slider to 0 and then back to 100% to see the effect. Now the emoji is smirking. What you're seeing here is a rare lesson. Design and development are usually treated like 2 different professions, but the web doesn't work that way. It's technical, and it can be beautiful. So let's get back to the development part. But first, a little detour. When I was younger, I used to watch Bob Ross on TV. I wasn't trying to paint. I was merely enjoying the sound of the guy's voice. It was relaxing. I used to fall asleep. If battling insomnia is your reason for visiting today, that's totally fine. But if you're serious about understanding how to build this project, the first line of coding is huge. In the looking script, the first step is to add an event listener. It's so short, but there's so much going on. So here it is. Window.onMouseMove equals function event. Okay, so what just happened? Let's break it down from left to right. Window means that we want the whole browser window. Event listeners can be added to specific elements, but here we want to cover as much space as possible. That way the eyes can look out into the distance. Next, we add onMouseMove. It's the event listener necessary for this task. Whenever the mouse moves, we want to update the direction of the eyeballs. The next part is attaching a function to the event listener. That's the reason for the equal sign and the word function. But what is the word event doing in the parentheses? It's recording the data related to the event. You can see this in the next two lines. Two variables are used to store the x and y locations of the mouse. The mx variable stands for mouse x, and the my variable stands for mouse y. You could use different names, but the important part is with the event properties. By using client x and client y, useful information is retrieved. There are other options, such as page x or screen x, but client x was picked because it works. Things like scaling or scrolling could cause issues, but since this project doesn't scroll, page x isn't really necessary. And since the mouse movement is only detected in the browser window, client x works better than screen x. What works best for you depends on your project, so don't be afraid to experiment. That's a great way to learn. The next two lines are essentially shorthand. You can select an element to work with by using Hype's JavaScript API. Hype document.getElementById is commonly used, and it is very similar to document.getElementById. The latter is standard JavaScript. The application recommends the use of the API version. It states that Hype may reassign IDs in cases of collision. We're sticking with Hype's recommendation for this part. The unique IDs are used to get the elements. The variable names are also unique. You might run into trouble, or at least confusion, if you use the same variable name as the ID. That's why I used a lowercase e as the variable prefix. The main idea is to create easy access to the important elements. You don't want to have to type Hype document blah 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 every time. Before we proceed, it's important to note that there can be more than one way to solve a problem, and at other times, you'll need an uncommon solution. This next part is a perfect example. We want the location of the left eye. By knowing its position relative to the mouse position, we can set the looking direction. The problem is that 3 different techniques may result in 3 different answers. In the first attempt, a more traditional JavaScript way, no value is returned. By default, in newer versions of Hype, a legacy option is unchecked. Without the Position with CSS Left Top option, there is no value to return. The second option, using the Hype getElementProperty API, a value is returned, but it is not applicable to this project. The left value is the distance within the group, not from the left of the screen. This is why the getBoundingClient rectangle method is used. It returns values that are relative to the viewport. You can visit caniuse.com to see the browser support. It's exceptional. We're not actually going to use these console log messages. It's more for educational purposes, so we're going to comment them out. We still haven't actually done anything yet. We're still getting the data. The next 4 lines are about finding the center location of the eyeballs. Let's look closely at LX, the center X location of the left eye. First, we get the left location value of the lefty element. Then we add half of the width of the lefty element to that value. If you look closely at how this was done, the getBoundingClient rectangle method was used to get the left value and the width value. Very handy. This line of code is very mathematical. What's within the parentheses is what's calculated first. That's what the /2 part is about. We're dividing the width in half. Then the left value and half of the width are added together. That's how you find the center X value of the left eye. To get the remaining values, this is continued for another 3 lines. We want the center Y value for the lefty element, and then we want the X and Y values for the righty element. I probably shouldn't hit you with so much math right away. We're only on the second Hype lesson, but this next part is even more complicated. That's right, I'm busting out the dual argument arctangent. What? The JavaScript atan2 math function can be confusing at first, but it makes short work of converting points on the grid into angles, which is exactly what we need for this project. So don't freak out, I'll explain what's going on. First, we're trying to get an angle. That's the beginning part, var angle equals. Next we use JavaScript, math.atan2. There are 3 sets of parentheses here. The first set is part of the atan2 function. As the number 2 suggests, it needs two values. That's why we need another two sets of parentheses. One set is for the y value, which goes first, and the second set is for the x value. The mouse y value was stored with the my variable. The lefty y value was stored with the ly variable. Inside the left set of parentheses, subtract ly from my. The right set of parentheses is set up in a similar fashion. Just use the x values. The result from the atan2 function is in radians. To solve this problem, radians are converted to degrees. The conversion can be very precise by using math.pi. Just divide 180 degrees by pi, which is the number of degrees in a radian. Instead of simply putting a rounded 57.3 degrees, a more accurate calculation can be used. These videos are not just fluff. If there's a tough topic on the road to success, we're going to drive right through it. That's a big part of web development. You're not only fighting with the code, you're fighting with yourself. Anxiety, frustration, doubt, these negative thoughts can wear you down, which can make it even harder for you to focus and finish your project. So believe in yourself. Break these challenging tasks into little pieces. Keep solving those challenges until you win. You can do it. You don't think so? Well, you made it this far, and this project is just about done. Simply repeat the same 2 lines of code for the right eye. Just update the variables accordingly. And boom, there it is, a happy and silly face. So, hopefully that answers the main question. When do you code? When is JavaScript absolutely necessary? For dynamic animation like this, or features that are just not included with Hype, a little JavaScript can add a lot of power to your project. Just look at it. This is only 30 lines of code, and that's counting line spaces, and another 5 lines that are only comments. Speaking of comments, how did you like this video? Do you want more? If so, encouraging feedback is the fuel for this channel. But if you don't want to wait for more videos, you might like a book about Hype. Not only does it cover lots of advanced topics like this one, it also has a crash course on JavaScript. It's a great way to learn Hype, and a lot of the information can be applied to building websites in general.